and welcome to the Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Sue Helm of the 104th District in Dauphin County. One of the biggest and most important challenges facing the state legislature each year is the adoption of a budget. Governor Corbett has proposed a budget that holds the line on spending. It's now the legislature's job to craft a spending plan for the next fiscal year. Joining me now to discuss this year's budget is Majority Appropriations Chairman Bill Adolph. Representative Adolph, thank you for being here.
Very nice to be here, Sue.
Could you just give me some information on the budget, like a general overview of how the budget works?
Sure. Each year, the governor addresses a joint session of the General Assembly and the State Senate and proposes a spending plan and how they're going to pay for it. Okay, this year, the governor came in the first week in February and proposed a $27.14 billion spending plan. The good news, is there's no proposals in the works to increase state taxes. No increases in the sales tax and no increases in the state income tax. What happens then is that the Appropriations Committee in both the House and the Senate held 3 weeks worth of budget hearings. And these budget hearings are no different than what a CEO does for a company, brings in all his department heads or her department heads, and or a township supervisor or a mayor of a city. They bring their department heads in and you go through the budget. So the Appropriations Committee, which is made up of 35 members of the State House from all over the Commonwealth, various regions, and the cabinet members come in. The Secretary of Welfare, the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Education, Health, etc., etc. Plus we bring in the state university presidents for the state system, as well as the state-related universities. And those hearings go on for 3 weeks, both in the House and both in the Senate. And we hear from them, is this enough money to run your departments? DEP, okay, welfare. And are you able to live with what the governor has proposed? And we put all these figures together. After we're done there, we hear from the individual legislators. And I've heard from you on numerous issues, and based upon your talks with your local county commissioners, local supervisors, local police departments, how this budget is going to affect them. Superintendents of schools, they contact their local legislators contact me, and together we try to put together a balanced budget, which we try to stay in the same parameters that the governor has set for us, and but most of the time, and there's never been a budget that a single governor has introduced that gets passed without any changes. And we have an advantage over the governor from this standpoint. The governor proposes his budget in February. We wait as long as we can, at least until we get May's revenues, to see how the revenues are coming in. And February revenues were above projections, and March, and we only have a few days left in March. March looks like they also will project a little higher than what we had projected. So this is good. The governor's $27.14 billion spending plan was based upon what had been projected as of January 31st. So we have a little bit of an advantage. However, we don't have control over the revenues. You know, if people are out there working and paying their taxes, revenues are coming in. If they're not working and they're laid off, collecting unemployment, there's no state income tax being collected. So, fortunately, last year we passed a budget on time with no state increases in taxes, and despite the loss of federal stimulus money, over $3 billion, which was almost 12% of our revenue. And I heard from my superintendents of schools, and I'm sure you did too, Sue, that they received less money from the state than they did the year before. But I'm sure they understand now that the only money that they lost was as a result of the federal stimulus money that we no longer receive as of June 30th, 2011. And we're trying to deal with the rising costs in pensions and the rising cost in taxes, that the school districts have to take into consideration. I have the job of introducing a budget on time. I always introduce, the governor's budget, and last year we amend that, and that was passed by the House, and it goes over to the Senate, and the Senate always has their input, and it comes back probably second, third week in June, and we concur if we agree. If we don't agree, we non-concur. But we are working behind the scenes to get these type of agreements, so we have an on-time budget. And it sounds kind of simple, on time. Well, that's your job. You have to have a budget done on time. Well, that didn't always happen, Sue, as you know. The previous administration never passed a budget on time. And I get teased a little bit from my friends on the other side of the aisle. Oh yeah, Bill, you made it by 15 minutes last year. Well, that's not really what we were talking about when you compared to being 6 months late. And the school districts were not getting their money. The state universities weren't getting their money. A lot of these state agencies, welfare agencies, social services, they weren't receiving their money either. And they were forced to borrow money and pay extra money out. So it seems like something that should be done, but I guarantee you we take our job very serious, and we're going to get it done on time again this year.
I know what you just said was no new taxes. I think that's so important to the people all over Pennsylvania, and my district especially, that there's no new taxes. But you also talked about we have to have the budget done. Unlike the federal government, we have a mandate that it must be done, a balanced budget on time by June the 30th.
Yes.
So you sort of talked about that, but tell me about the challenge that presents to the legislatures, legislators, how we have to accomplish that.
Look, Pennsylvania is a pretty big state, a lot of diversity. Agriculture is still our leading industry, and we have two big urban centers in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. And we have a lot of small cities in between, Harrisburg being one of them, and they're all facing tough financial times. We're not out of this recession, and this recession that started in 2008, the beginning of 2008, it was the worst recession in our lifetime, and we're only bringing in revenue at the same rate as we did in 2007, 2008. So it's our opinion that you don't throw taxes at folks that are trying to fight this recession. A lot of people have been laid off. This time last year, Pennsylvania unemployment rate was over 8%. We've been able to decrease unemployment by a full 1% in a short 12-month period. And I really believe that has a lot to do with the incentives that we gave the certain industries here in Pennsylvania. And we recently passed a local impact fee, which will bring in billions of dollars to Pennsylvania for us to protect the environment and bring in over 100,000 new jobs here in Pennsylvania. So by doing that, that will increase our revenues. 40% of our revenue, Sue, comes from the PIT, Pennsylvania income tax, 3.07% of people's wages. And that's 40% of our revenue. So if people are working, we are collecting revenue. If they're not working, we are losing the biggest chunk of our revenue, the personal income tax. It's a flat tax. The second revenue source is sales tax. When we go out to dinner, when we go out to breakfast, when we go out to eat lunch, we pay 6% on our prepared foods. When we buy household goods, washers, dryers, sporting goods equipment, 6% sales tax. We don't pay 6% sales tax on our necessities, food that we buy at the grocery store or our clothing. We don't pay sales tax on services. You go to an accountant, you go to a doctor, you go to an attorney, architect. There's no sales tax on professional services. So what we are taxing is what the folks are spending on some of the stuff that maybe they don't have to have, okay? But obviously, you're going to have a washer and a dryer. When these things break, people have to go out and they buy and they pay the sales tax. 32% of our revenue comes from sales tax. And, you know, when people are laid off, they do cut back. And we felt this tremendously in the last couple of budgets. So I certainly would not be in favor of raising the rate of sales tax. If they can't afford those products at a 6% sales tax rate, why should we go and make it 7%, as been suggested by previous administrations? So we're trying to live within our means, just like these small business folks are doing, just like the households are doing. And I think we're slowly but surely getting spending under control. I mean, Sue, the previous administration, they came to Harrisburg, the budget was $20 billion. In 8 short years, the last budget was proposed over $29 billion. That's a 33% increase in 8 years. The cost of living was 19%. It was an unsustainable rate of government spending, and I think Pennsylvania, despite what they hear, you know, how bad the draconian cuts are, we are living within our means. And if revenue does increase, and we're going to be able to restore some of the cuts like we did last year to higher education, as well as our local school districts. We're going to try to build back into that the accountability block grants for our school districts and so forth. So, but the revenue has to come in.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the accountability block grants? I think that's a question that many people are asking right now.
Yeah, the accountability block grant is state money that goes to the 500 school districts. Last year was $100 million. The governor has not included that in this proposal, and many of our legislators are lobbying for that as a result of talking to their superintendents and their school boards and so forth. And what it is, it's cash that we send to the school districts that gives them the flexibility. There's no strings attached to this money, meaning if they feel that they need to hire a teacher with it, okay, they can hire a teacher with it. If they need to start a program, a kindergarten program, they can use that money for it. They can use the money for transportation. There's no strings attached. There's nothing that it must be spent on special ed, or it must be spent on teacher salaries, or it has to be spent in the classroom. It's flexible. And I think the school boards like that. We're going to do our darndest to try to find some money and include that in the final budget. And whether you're a rich school district, okay, or a poor urban area, or a poor rural area, they all get a percentage of that accountability grant. So it's something that I know the legislators are pushing for.
And we're going to do the best we can for education, because we all know that's important. So, and I think educating the school districts and how these block grants works is also something we need to do and will do. But we're not finished with the budget yet, and we're absolutely going to look at education and try and do whatever we can for the students. So let's take a little break now, and we'll come back and talk later.
Sounds good.
Did you know that Act 16 of 1999 honors one of the greatest leaders in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives? The Matthew J. Ryan Legislative Office Building, once known as the Capitol Annex, is located next to the main Capitol building and honors the late Speaker of the House, Matthew J. Ryan. Those who visit this building will observe the magnificent architectural designs providing eloquence and grandeur to the building. Known as one of the greatest members in the history of the Pennsylvania State House, Matthew Ryan started his career in the legislature in 1963 and was elected Speaker in 1981. His charisma and knowledge will forever be reflected in the building now named after this great legislative leader. Now you know.
Did you know that in the corridors in the first floor of the Capitol of Pennsylvania, there are nearly 400 individual mosaics? The idea for creating these intricate tiles was first suggested by Henry C. Mercer in 1902. A year later, he received the commission to prove 16,000 square feet of pavement tiles for the Great Rotunda and corridors of the new State Capitol building in Harrisburg. Mercer set about designing subjects for approximately 400 mosaics. He chose as his general theme the history of Pennsylvania, and he soon realized that his tiles could tell stories. Although the arrangement seems random, the mosaics are very thoughtfully placed in the floor. The tile sequence is roughly chronological, beginning at one end with the scenes depicting the Native Americans. The mosaics progress into the story of European habitation in the New World and encompass the Commonwealth's triumph through process and intervention. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. I'm State Representative Sue Helm. I'm pleased to have Representative Bill Adolph as my guest. He's chairman of the Appropriations Committee, and we're discussing the state budget. But Bill, last year you did a wonderful job with the budget. We passed it on time. But people would like to know about you. Like, tell me, outside of this House of Representatives, which I know you work really hard here, tell me what you do.
Well, first of all, I'm from Delaware County. Springfield, Delaware County is my hometown. I've lived there just about my entire life. I'm a partner in a small accounting firm. My partner's a CPA. He runs the everyday part of it. When I got elected to the legislature, so I gave up my business part of it. I still do an awful lot of individual tax returns on the weekends, and I coached football for 32 years. That's actually how I got involved in politics. I used to go to the township meetings and complain why the grass wasn't being cut on the fields or why the fields weren't lined. And the powers to be in the political party said, why don't we bring this guy into politics? And I certainly enjoy politics and government work. It's real part of an achievement. There's competition involved, and it's been great. And being a small businessman, I think I understand the struggles that they have. And when I do tax returns, I'm talking to wage earners, and they're handing me their W-2s and handing me their mortgage statements and handing me their car payments and their doctor bills. So everything that we talk about and deal with up here, when you prepare someone's tax return, that's really life, and that's what we're trying to make a better life for Pennsylvania residents, and it helps. And I know I've had some of our colleagues come down to Delaware County, and I mean I can walk outside my office and I can see the skyline of Philadelphia. I'm only 5 miles outside the city, and It's a big metropolitan area. And when I drive 2 hours west to Harrisburg, I mean, I get to meet folks from all walks of life, you know, all different professions and so forth, and from the different areas of Pennsylvania. So, you know, I'm very fortunate to be the Appropriations Chair. You're elected among your peers, and I think it's good to have a bean counter as as the Appropriations Chair. And I like working within the caucus and so forth, and listening to the legislators' needs for their areas. And I reach out to the other side of the aisle, and you know, I would like to get them involved in decision making, but part of that decision also comes with bringing something to the table. So I do ask them to do that. Just don't complain about it. Let's work together and get things done. And I think that's what people want up here in Harrisburg.
Well, I know when I was first elected, when I first became a rep, you were also chairman of the Professional Licensure Committee. And I thought you were excellent there, and I did get to come to your area and see, you know, where you live also, which I think helps everybody know how the different parts of the state operate. Sure. And then you were promoted, you won this election as Appropriations Chairman. Or how do you become Appropriations Chairman? How does that happen?
Well, it's a caucus election, you know, and we all go through elections back home, and that's the most important election, you know. But up here, there's leadership positions, and anyone in leadership, anyone in the caucus can run for a leadership position. And the reason I ran is there was a retiring member who held this position, and so there was an opening. And I ran against two good guys, and you know, you go out and you talk to, at that time there was about 100 of us in here, and you try to get 51 votes. And that's how you do it. And you do that every term. And it's been a real privilege and an honor to represent our caucus in the budget negotiations with the other caucuses, as well as the governor. And I think my financial background does help. I certainly understand the tax structure in Pennsylvania, and I also understand that Pennsylvanians want to control spending. And this is something that is not easy. It's not easy. I mean, I raised 3 boys, and you have to say no to your boys once in a while. And you know, it's difficult because you like to please them, but you know, you have to live within in your means, and I think that's what we're doing here in Pennsylvania right now.
Well, I think Representative Adolph has done a really good job for us as Appropriations Chairman. I think being a CPA has helped. But tell me now, what challenges do you think is going to happen this year with the budget? Well, the biggest challenge is the revenue. So, you know, people think we're just sitting on a pile of cash here, but we don't have a pile of cash. We are actually projected to run at a deficit this year. Even though we decreased spending by $1 billion last year, we're still running at a deficit. Now, we have an advantage over the governor, as I said. You know, we'll wait until the end of May to get the best projections of revenue. But when the governor put together this budget, he had to base it upon January 31st projections. And at that time, we were running $700 million behind projections. That is the challenge. If we can get that $700 million down to a $200–300 million deficit, then we're going to be able to restore some of the cuts that the governor has proposed based upon our revenue. That's the challenge, because I do not believe now's the time to raise taxes on folks. It's never a good time to raise taxes, but we don't sell pizzas here, we don't sell furniture, we don't sell clothing. Our revenue comes from fees and taxes, and people understand that. As long as you live within your means, there's a time to raise taxes and there's a time to decrease taxes. And I think right now we're just trying to control spending. And tell me, historically speaking, like how did we determine what money was going to be used for the budget? How did we determine how the budget actually came about?
Well, I guess we'll have to go back to Ben Franklin to figure out, how we spend it. But, really, the governor sets the table, okay? And, really, we spend our area 40% in education. 40% of our spending comes from education, okay? Another 40% comes in the Department of Welfare. Now, I personally think, and we took about $1 billion out of the welfare budget last year. And we didn't do it. We just didn't cut it. We used Auditor General Jack Wagner's suggestions based upon audits. Jack Wagner's a Democrat. I think he's doing an outstanding job here in Pennsylvania. And we used his figures. And as far as cutting out some of the waste and abuse that was out there under the previous administration, and we heard this from welfare folks. There was a motto there: close your eyes and authorize. And boy, as a taxpayer and a small business person, you certainly don't want that type of attitude. And we've turned that around. But there's an awful lot of folks that need money here in Pennsylvania based upon their health, based upon physical needs, and we got to make sure that those folks that need it the most receive it. And if there's a lot of waste and abuse up at the top, that money does not trickle down. So I think our Secretary of Welfare, Secretary Alexander, has done a real good job in the first year. And we will continue to look for waste and abuse, but you can trust me, Sue, we will not cut out money for the needy. And those folks that need it the most, those children and the mentally ill and the mentally retarded folks, we will get the money to them.
Well, we're glad to hear that, and we definitely have our challenge ahead of us. By June 30th, we have to have that budget done.
Yes.
Is there one main challenge that we have to get it done?
Well, they always say in order to pass a budget, you need 102 votes in the House, 26 in the Senate, and the governor's signature. That's the challenge. And trying to get 102 people to agree on something in the House, Sue, as you know, sometimes is the biggest challenge. And I think that's the challenge, because what's good in, say, central Pennsylvania, folks in southwest Pennsylvania may not agree. And what's good in the great Northwest in Pennsylvania, maybe the folks in the Southeast won't agree with it. And that's the challenge, getting enough folks to agree on a budget. That's the challenge, and we're certainly up to it.
Well, Representative Adolph, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And we'll get this done June the 30th or before.
It's nice working with you.
Thank you.
Right.
That's all the time we have for today's program. If you have any comments or questions about these or any other legislative topics, my contact information will be on the screen in a moment. Thanks for watching, and join me again for Legislative Report.